Around here at the Daily Wire, where we love our Ben Shapiro, we like to say that facts don't care about your feelings. But one of the things I always add, because I'm coming at this from a different point of view than Ben, is that feelings are also a fact, especially in a democracy, but really in your own life, in any kind of government. The way people are feeling, their mood counts for everything. Just check this with your own life. And, I remember myself, back in the 90s, I wrote a book, a novel that was very important to me. And it was very different from the usual stuff I do, which is crime stories and kind of genre stories. This was not a genre book. It was a very personal book. And I wrote it and I couldn't sell it in America. I sold it in Britain, but I couldn't sell it in America. And it broke my heart. It was just a genuinely heartbreaking experience. While that happened, when my heart was broken, the world seemed to me a very dark place. Now, because I'm an artist, I understood, because this is what novelists know. What novelists know is your life is never quite rational. You think you're being rational, but your feelings and your experience and your upbringing, they all play into your mood and into your philosophy. While I was in this dark place, the world seemed to me like a dark place. And I remember saying to my wife, I know this is just me. I know everything is fine. I know the world is ticking along as it usually is, but everything just looks terrible. It looks like the culture's collapsing. It looks like politics are going bad. And it's all because I couldn't sell this book and I feel bad. And anyone who's ever experienced this, most of us have some kind of setback, ill health, or the ill health of someone you love, or one of your children having problems, or losing a job, or missing a promotion, anything like that just puts you in a lousy mood. You suddenly you don't think to yourself, oh, I am in a lousy mood. What you think is everything is bad. Everything is bad. And this is one of the reasons I hammer so much at the culture, because I know what the dishonest news people at NBC, like guys like Chuck Todd, the dishonest news people at CNN, guys like Don Lemon and Cuomo, all these people who are selling you crisis, they're selling you panic, they're selling you the fact that, everything is terrible. They don't have to win each time. They don't have to sell you each story. Their stories can be debunked, like the recent Lanny Davis story. The CNN doesn't even have to retract it. They just go on to the next lie, the next panicky story, because they're trying to affect a general mood. They're trying to give you the feeling that something is terribly wrong. And when you think about it, nothing's terribly wrong. Things are really tickety-boo. Things are going pretty well, Economy's ticking away. ISIS is gone. Judges are better. Regulation's better. The business world is feeling pretty good about Donald Trump. Everything is fine except the news. Everything is fine except the news. So the other day, there was a pre-release of Bob Woodward's new book about Donald Trump with the subtle, graceful title, Fear! Fear! That's how you have to read it. It's not just the word. It's that you have to read it in that. It's Fear by Bob Woodward. Fear! So it just tells all this stuff that's going on behind the scenes, says Woodward, and we'll talk about that in a minute, says Woodward, in the Trump administration. So I'll read you just a couple of them. I think this is from the Boston Globe. It's their list, but the list is the same everywhere. After a January National Security Council meeting in which North Korea was discussed, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis told close associates the president acted like and had the understanding of a fifth or sixth grader. Now, Mattis, I'm not sure he disavowed that particular quote, but he has called the whole thing fiction. He says the book is fiction. So he denies it. White House Chief of Staff John F. Kelly told colleagues that he thought the president was unhinged. In one meeting, Kelly said of Trump, he's an idiot. It's pointless to try to convince him of anything. He's gone off the rails. We're in crazy town. I don't even know why any of us are here. This is the worst job I've ever had. Kelly also, he issued a statement saying the idea I ever called the president an idiot is not true. As I stated back in May and still firmly stand behind, I spend more time with the president than anyone else, and we have an incredibly candid and strong relationship. He always knows where I stand, and he and I both know this story is total BS. And by the way, even Ann Coulter got into a four-letter, shouting match with the president. He's an obstreperous guy. He surrounded himself with macho men. I'm sure they have lots of screaming arguments. But anyway, this is the story. I'm just giving you what Woodward is writing. Trump was vicious in his remarks about Attorney General Jeff Sessions, saying he's at one point to an aide, this guy's mentally retarded. He's this dumb Southerner. He couldn't even be a one-person country lawyer down in Alabama. Trump says he never said it. He loves Southerners, never said those words. Trump called Mattis, saying he wanted to assassinate the Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. I'm not sure why that's bad, but apparently he said after Assad launched a chemical attack on civilians in April 2017, Trump said, let's kill the bloody lot of them. And Mattis hung up and told the senior aide, we're not going to do any of that. We're going to be much more measured. That makes perfect sense to me. I mean, there's a chemical attack, Trump blows up, and Mattis says he'll calm down and we're not going to do anything. Senior aides conspired to remove official papers from Trump's desk so he couldn't see or sign them. In one case, an aide prepared a letter withdrawing the United States from NAFTA. Cohn told the aide, I can stop this. I'll just take the paper off his desk. The United States remains in NAFTA, though it's renegotiating new terms with Canada and Mexico. I don't believe that story. That story is not true. I do not believe somebody took a page off the president's desk to keep him from signing it. That is a garbage story. That's the kind of story you might say to a reporter, you might brag about, but it didn't happen. I would bet money that didn't happen. One of the things about these things, I'll talk more about Woodward and his sources in a minute, but one of the things about this is like, there's always an underling who says the boss is an idiot. All underlings think the boss is an idiot. There's always an underling who's going to blow things up. There's going to be people who are dissatisfied. There's always somebody who just wants to be quoted in a Bob Woodward book and all this stuff. So a story like that, I don't know. That just really smells to me. I've heard all kinds of people brag all kinds of things, especially in the movie business. You hear people, I told him, and I told him this. I backed him into a corner. Baloney. John Dowd, then Trump's personal attorney, staged a practice session to see if Trump would commit perjury if he were questioned by special counsel Robert Mueller. Dowd peppered Trump with questions and elicited stumbles, contradictions, and lies. In a meeting with Mueller, Dowd talked about the session and explained to Mueller why he was trying to keep the president from testifying. I'm not going to sit there and let him look like an idiot. Man, that's probably true. Let's just play Sarah Sanders' reaction to this. Obviously, Trump has disavowed the entire thing.
Look, he may have hundreds of hours of tapes, but I think most of those probably come from some disgruntled former employees. It's a lot of anonymous sources. What I can tell you is I've worked alongside the president, under the president, for the last 3 years. I was part of his campaign. I've been part of the administration since day one. And I can tell you that the president, everything so far that I've seen out of this book doesn't depict what's going on in the building behind me. The president laid out an agenda very clearly during the campaign. And since day one of taking office, he's delivering on that agenda every single day. You can't have the type of success that this president has had if what that book says is true. Well, and you have people like General Mattis, General Kelly, two American heroes come out and call the book pure fiction. I would certainly rather take the word of those two individuals than a couple of disgruntled former employees that are anonymously attacking this president, trying to make him look bad for no other reason, I guess, than to build themselves up.
Now, Stephanopoulos is about to say, he breaks into her and says, oh, this is only one of many books, but the other books have been completely discredited. Michael Wolff's book and Omarosa's book. I mean, who believes this stuff? But Woodward is a different guy. Now, Woodward, the brief on Woodward is always this, that whoever talks to him gets to tell the story. So in other words, if you're his source, you get to tell the story. He does not go to 5 other people and then report all the different things that they say. If he gets contact with you, if he has access to you, you are going to get to affect the book. And Woodward says he tried to contact Trump. Trump says he never heard about it. Here's a conversation they had on the phone, which Woodward recorded with Trump's permission.
You know, it's a tough look at the world and your administration and you.
Right. Well, I assume that means it's going to be a negative book, but I'm sort of 50% used to that. That's all right. Some are good and some are bad. Sounds like this is going to be a bad one.
It's a chance missed, and I don't know how things work over there in terms of getting to you.
Well, if you would call Madeline in my office, did you speak to Madeline?
No, I didn't. But
Madeline is the key. She's the secret because she's the person.
I talked to Kelly.
Well, a lot of them are afraid to come and talk, or they are busy. I'm busy, but I don't mind talking to you. I would have spoken to you. I spoke to you 20 years ago. I spoke to you a year and a half or 2 years ago.
I understand.
And I certainly don't mind talking to you. And I wish I could have spoken to you.
Well,
but nobody called my office.
You need to know I made maximum effort.
All right, it's too bad.
Yes, sir.
I'm just hearing about it, and I did hear from Lindsay, but I'm just hearing about it. So we're going to have a very inaccurate book, and that's too bad.
No,
but I don't blame you entirely.
Be accurate.
All right, okay. Well, accurate is that nobody's ever done a better job than I'm doing as president.
There's Trump standing up for himself, and at least they're talking, to each other. So that's a good thing. But here's the thing. Woodward I don't think he makes stuff up. I don't think, he's been accused of all kinds of things, but nobody likes it when you report stuff like this. But this does not mean it's accurate. All I'm saying is the person who talks to Woodward gets to tell his story. That is the brief on him and always has been. Do not listen to this garbage from the left, which you will now hear about he's a legend, Watergate, he's a legend, because he brought out books about Obama too, and when he did that, the left went nuts. Remember, he said, what did he say? He said Obama has no plan to deal with the war on terror. He said Obama has said things like, we can sustain a terrorist attack if we have to. He said an Obama aide. He never used the word. Woodward never used the word that he threatened him, but he said, you will regret going up against us, I think. And the left went nuts. David Plouffe, former Obama campaign manager, claimed that watching Woodward was like imagining my idol Mike Schmidt facing live pitching again. In other words, he'd lost his stuff. Former LA Times reporter Steve Weinstein said Woodward is senile. Politico White House reporter Glenn Thrush wondered if Woodward was humped up his book sales. He was trying to hump up his book sales from GOPers. Woodward does duty with the phony outrage machine was a Huffington Post headline. They went after him. They said he had disgraced himself. I remember this vividly, that suddenly the fact that Woodward was reporting harshly on Obama, and he really did report harshly. He said the guy really didn't know what he was doing. Suddenly Woodward was trash. Now he's a hero again because he's after Trump. All of this speaks well of Woodward, except that I really do feel that, here's the thing. Let's say it's all true. Let's say there are people back there and they're calling Trump an idiot and they're throwing things, they're stealing papers off his desk. It's working great. The country is in great shape. The economy's great. We're at peace. It's like the judges he's appoints are great. The regulations are good. Even some of these trade deals are beginning to, I still have my doubts. I'm still keeping an eye open, but at least he's pushing forward with the trade deal. He's made some agreements with Mexico. It looks like Canada is going to come to the table. So if this is the way he runs things, that's too bad for the people who work there. But what do we care, right? I don't work there. The question I have is, does Woodward have any sources watching TV and seeing what is happening at the Kavanaugh hearings? Because if you want to talk about dysfunctional, take a look at what the Democrats paid people to do, it now seems. It now seems they paid people to protest. They brought in mostly women screaming and yelling about Roe v. Wade and other things. Linda Sarsour, anti-Semitic fan of Sharia law, was carried out on the first day. Let's take a quick look at what's happening. I mean, just talking about dysfunctional, Woodward is saying, I've got sources that say there's a dysfunctional White House. You want to talk about crazy town? It's on TV. Take a look at this. So even that's the way Democrats do democracy, right? That's the way Democrats think democracy should work, where a woman who supports Sharia law is being carried out of our legislature. A woman who supports the atrocity of Sharia law is being carried out of our legislature, the pinnacle, our ideas, the constitutional ideas, are the pinnacle of human legal thinking. And a woman who supports Sharia is being carried out of there in protest. Really? Really? I mean, that's what Democrats think is going to make us think like, yes, Democrats, that's what we need for the midterms. But even worse than the chaos that they were paying to have and the staging and the kabuki show is the actual arguments they're making. Ben Sasse yesterday, and I know a lot of people have paid attention to this, but it's worth going over because Ben Sasse in 2 minutes said more wisdom than I've heard from the mainstream media, certainly, and certainly a lot of our politicians, because we need to go back to basics. I keep saying this again and again. We need to go back to basics. And Ben Sasse, in about 2 minutes, delivered in his opening statement a statement about why things are like this that is just so important. We got to play at least a little bit of it. Let's start with how he talks about the system. For those of you who don't remember Schoolhouse Rock, do you remember that? It was an animated television show where they would sing little songs about how a bill works, how Congress works, little civic lessons. Here is Ben Sass's cut number 4 on how the system is supposed to work.
The solution is to restore a proper constitutional order with a balance of powers. We need Schoolhouse Rock back. We need a Congress that writes laws and then stands before the people and suffers the consequences and gets to go back to our own Mount Vernon if that's what the electors decide. We need an executive branch that has a humble view of its job as enforcing the law, not trying to write laws in the Congress's absence. And we need a judiciary that tries to apply written laws to facts and cases that are actually before it. This is the elegant and the fair process that the founders created. It's the process where the people who are elected, 2 and 6 years in this institution, 4 years in the executive branch, can be fired because the justices and the judges, the men and women who serve America's people by wearing black robes, they're insulated from politics.
His point here is so important because really it centers on the legislature. I really feel this way, that the Supreme Court has been hijacked by leftists who feel that you can appoint people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Breyer, guys who will not think about the Constitution, who talk about the living Constitution, which is a Constitution, as Antonin Scalia would say, that it's a new day every day. It just says different things on the Constitution every single day. And those on the conservative side who want to uphold the law, who are not there to make law, but are there to referee whether the law fits into the context and the construction provided by the Constitution. The failure in the legislature, the frozen nature of the legislature, the deadlock, that's the word I'm looking for, the deadlock in the legislature is what is seriously wrong with the country. I mean, when you have two sides that can't sit down and make immigration law, when you have Chuck, who's the head of the Senate, the Democrats, Chuck Schumer, thank you. I just blocked that name. Like other unpleasant things, I just blocked Chuck Schumer's name. When you have Chuck Schumer waving a pen at the press saying, the president should be making the law, the president should be making laws about immigration, and nobody in the press thinks to say, excuse me, you're the legislature means you're supposed to be making law. That's a problem. And what Sass is saying there is when you make laws, when you make legislative laws, this goes on the right and the left. This is not just on Schumer. This is on both the left and the right. When you make laws about immigration, you are going to displease somebody. You are going to displease the people who want to throw out all the evil Mexicans, and you're going to throw out all the people who want to let in all the wonderful Mexicans. Whatever they're thinking, you're going to displease people on both sides, and you may get unelected. You may get thrown out of office. That's your job. And the legislature is frozen. Each side is playing to its base. They can only make the absolute law that is going to satisfy the base on the right and the base on the left. And so they can't make any law. They can't compromise. They can't talk to one another. They can't be seen to be weak. Because if they're weak, they're going to have the right or the left mobilize against them and throw them out. That is not the way the legislature is supposed to work. We're a divided country right now. That means our legislature has to compromise because we have to compromise. And that's the way the world works. If that doesn't happen, you have a Supreme Court making law, 5 people passing laws over you, an executive making law with his pen and his phone like a king, and then it becomes necessary to slander people, to bork them, as the Democrats, a method the Democrats invented as Kavanaugh is being borked right now. And Sass talks about that. This is cut number 6, and how bad that is and why that shouldn't happen.
So the question before us today is not what does Brett Kavanaugh think 11 years ago on some policy matter. The question before us is whether or not he has the temperament and the character to take his policy views and his political preferences and put them in a box marked irrelevant and set it aside every morning when he puts on the black robe. The question is, does he have the character and temperament to do that? If you don't think he does, vote no. But if you think he does, stop the charades. Because at the end of the day, I think all of us know that Brett Kavanaugh understands his job isn't to rewrite laws as he wishes they were. He understands that he's not being interviewed to be a super legislator. He understands that his job isn't to seek popularity. His job is to be fair and dispassionate. It is not to exercise empathy. It is to follow written laws. Contrary to the onion-like smears that we hear outside, Judge Kavanaugh doesn't hate women and children. Judge Kavanaugh doesn't lust after dirty water and stinky air. No, looking at his record, it seems to me that what he actually dislikes are legislators that are too lazy and too risk-averse to do our actual jobs.
That bingo. I mean, bingo. And so instead of this, I mean, look, Bob Woodward may be right in every single particular. Maybe every day in the White House, somebody's calling somebody else an idiot, and maybe Donald Trump is going off half-cocked and people are stealing papers off his desk. I don't buy it, but maybe, some of it's true, maybe all of it's true, whatever. But that seems to be working really well, okay? That seems to be working really well. What's not working is the legislature. What is not working is a group of people who cannot get together and agree that this is a completely qualified individual to serve on the Supreme Court. He should not be slandered. Some of the things that happened yesterday were disgusting. The young lady, if you can see her sitting back, a pretty brunette sitting in back of him, is a lady named Zena Bash, one of his former law clerks. She had at one point her hand resting on the crook of her arm, and it made a sort of circle of thumb and forefinger, which has become this kind of internet meme that is somehow, that's the AOK sign, right? That's the OK sign. Is somehow this is now a white supremacy sign. That went around the world, like a lie before the truth could put its pants on. It's a disgusting thing to do to her. First of all, this shouldn't be important, but she's half Jewish and half Mexican. Unlikely she's a white supremacist, just saying, but still, that should not, that you can get busted for giving the OK sign. I know what sign I give to that. It's not the OK sign. That's ridiculous. That the fact that the Kavanaugh's parents were in tears watching them hammer him, the fact that his children had to be removed under security, and also this guy who lost his daughter, God bless him, it's a terrible thing, is Fred Guttenberg, who lost his daughter in the Parkland shootings. That's a terrible, terrible thing. But he went up to shake Kavanaugh's hand, and it was pretty obvious that security surrounded Kavanaugh and shoved him out. And then he said, he refused to shake my hand. He refused to shake my hand. This is disgusting. This is a setup. He was invited there for political purposes. Another man, Andrew Pollack, who also lost his daughter in the shooting, said Judge Kavanaugh is not responsible for the Parkland school shooting. He said, I too will never see my daughter again. And blaming President Trump and Kavanaugh, of all people, for Parkland is completely illogical. And he blames the school board, the police, and the FBI, who actually all failed to do their jobs in this case. So, this is the kind of thing, the reason this is happening is all goes back to the legislature. It all goes back to a legislature that will not take the risk of being voted out of office, that will not pass a law, that will not compromise, that is too answerable to its donors and to its base, and is frozen solid. It is frozen solid. And, there's not a crisis in this country. This country is not in crisis. Donald Trump is not a crisis. He's an obstreperous businessman, an outsider, doing what he said he was going to do. He's got traits I don't like. He does things I don't like. He does things I think are great. He has traits that I think are hilarious and fun. All those things are true. That's not a crisis. That's not a crisis. That's just news. That's the news. That's not a crisis. Believe me, when you see a crisis, you will know it. It's a crisis when you don't have a job. It's a crisis when you can't, say what you want to say without getting banned and shadow banned and mobbed and losing your job. It's a crisis when you can't speak the truth. Those are crises. This is not a crisis. This judge is not a crisis. And they're just trying to set that up because they know if they can affect your mood, it will affect the politics of the country, and especially it will affect the midterms.